unfortunately kind of highly prized by both us and the Soviet Union, with some of their chemical weapons know-how and some of their more insidious things that they were into. But anyway, we brought in individuals like specifically Reinhard Gehlen. He was Hitler's master spy who'd built up an intelligence network in the Soviet Union. He created the Gehlen Organization here in the United States, a band of refugee Nazi spies who reactivated their networks in Russia. And this included SS intelligence officers Alfred Six, Emil Augsburg, who massacred Jews in the Holocaust, Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, Otto von Bolschwing, the Holocaust mastermind who worked with Eichmann, and SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny, a personal friend of Hitler's. The Gehlen Organization supplied the U.S. with its only intelligence on the Soviet Union for the next 10 years, serving as a bridge between the abolishment of the OSS and the creation of the CIA. However, much of the, quote, intelligence the former Nazis provided was bogus. Gehlen inflated Soviet military capabilities at a time when Russia was still rebuilding its devastated society in order to inflate his own importance to the Americans, who otherwise might punish him. This, by the way, a website, I'll have this on the American Faith Today Facebook page. Basically, it's a timeline of CIA atrocities. It's collected and put out by a man by the name of Steve Kangas. But anyway, Gehlen basically inflated what the Soviets were doing, what they were capable of, where they were at. And in 1948, he almost convinced us that war was imminent and that we should make a preemptive strike. In the 50s, he produced a fictitious missile gap, and also, to make matters worse, the Russians had thoroughly penetrated his organization with double agents, undermining our very security that he was supposed to protect. But anyway, that all started at the end of World War II. In 1947, the CIA was created. And it was created when President Harry Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947 that created the CIA and the National Security Council. The CIA was accountable to the president through the NSC, but there was no democratic or congressional oversight, and to this day, there still is basically no democratic or congressional oversight. And basically, when Congress has tried to investigate things regarding the CIA, it's wound up going nowhere. Its charter allowed the CIA to perform such other functions and duties as the National Security Council may from time to time direct. This loophole opened the door to covert action and dirty tricks. In 1948, 1 year later, the CIA recreated a covert action wing, which was, again, abolished by FDR in 1945, called the Office of Policy Coordination, led by a Wall Street lawyer. And for those Shepherd's Chapel students, I don't know if he was a Kennite. I don't know. I know that he was regarded as being Jewish in his ethnicity or in his, but his name is Frank Wisner. He led this covert wing of the CIA. According to its secret charter, its responsibilities included propaganda, economic warfare, preventive direct action, including sabotage, anti-sabotage, demolition and evacuation procedures, subversion against hostile states, including assistance to underground resistance groups, and support of indigenous anti-communist elements in threatened countries of the free world. And in 1949, they then created their first major propaganda outlet, Radio Free Europe. Over the next several decades, its broadcasts were so blatantly false that for a time it was considered illegal to publish transcripts of them in the United States. It was also in the late 40s that the CIA unleashed and went with Operation Mockingbird, which you may or may not be familiar with. But one of the things that certainly, whether you're a socialist regime a communist regime, whether you are the Kenites, whether you are the globalist, whether you are the New World Order, the Bilderbergs, whatever you want to call them, the Illuminati, whether you're a dictator in some country or a dictator wannabe in some country, one of the first things you always want to do is control the media. Well, the CIA, with Operation Mockingbird, began recruiting American news organizations and journalists to become spies and disseminators of propaganda. The effort is headed by Frank Wisner, Alan Dulles, Richard Helms, and Philip Graham. Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post at the time, which would become a major CIA player. Eventually, the CIA's media assets will include ABC, NBC, CBS, Time, Newsweek, the Associated Press, the United Press International, Reuters, Hearst Newspapers, Scripps Howard, Copley News Service, and more. By the CIA's own admission, at least 25 organizations and 400 journalists will become CIA assets. And by the way, I will kind of skip ahead to present day, or more present day. There was an editor of a major German daily newspaper. I don't know if I have the pronunciation completely correct. Dr. Udo Ofkate. He wound up doing interviews with Russia Today, interviews with other sources. He was the first credentialed, well-known media insider to step forward and basically admit that he was secretly a propagandist and that he had personally planted stories for the CIA. And this is a guy who, by the way, and it could have been death from natural causes, but this was a guy who, in going out talking about how he basically was a propagandist for the CIA, that he planted stories for him, talking about how he was witness to Saddam Hussein's poison gas attacks and things of that nature. He was actually found dead of a heart attack earlier this year. Now, again, that could have been completely natural causes. One of the things that the CIA did have that they developed was actually a gun that could cause heart attacks. And again, not implicating them in that without any evidence, but he was somebody who came out and said that, yes, I planted stories for the CIA to manipulate people, to deceive people. He's now dead. But anyway, Operation Mockingbird. In 1953, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran in a military coup after he threatened to nationalize British oil. They replaced him with a dictator, the Shah of Iran, whose secret police, Savak, was as brutal as the Gestapo. Also in 1953, the CIA unleashed Operation MK Ultra, that was inspired by North Korea's brainwashing program. They began experiments on mind control. The most notorious part of the project involved giving LSD and other drugs to American subjects without their knowledge or against their will, causing several to commit suicide. But they went far further than that. Funded in part by the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations, research would include propaganda, brainwashing, public relations, advertising, hypnosis, and other forms of suggestion. In 1954, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected leader of Guatemala in a military coup, who had threatened to nationalize the Rockefeller-owned United Fruit Company, in which CIA Director Alan Dulles also owned stock. He was replaced with a series of right-wing dictators whose bloodthirsty policies would kill over 100,000 Guatemalans in the next 40 years. In 1956, Radio Free Europe, which previously was mentioned, a CIA creation, incited Hungary to revolt by broadcasting Khrushchev's secret speech in which he denounced Stalin. It also hints that American aid will help the Hungarians fight. This aid would fail to materialize as the Hungarians launched a doomed armed revolt which led to a major Soviet invasion. The conflict wound up killing 7,000 Soviets and 30,000 Hungarians. In 1959, the CIA and the U.S. military, under the CIA direction, got involved in Haiti, and basically, you might say, originated the mess that for decades would become Haiti. They helped Papa Doc Duvalier become dictator of Haiti. He created his own private police force, the Tonton Macoutes, who terrorized the population with machetes. They would kill over 100,000 during the Duvalier family reign. The U.S. did not protest Haiti's dismal, and the Duvalier regime's dismal human rights record. In 1961, as we get into the Kennedy presidency, and by the way, the one president that actually maybe, there's an article that I'll link from WorldNet Daily. I'm not going to say it's totally accurate, but the one president that maybe actually tried to do away with the CIA or tried to speak to the dangerous elements of the CIA was JFK. There's a quote here from JFK saying, "I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the wind." And then, of course, JFK was assassinated. He was assassinated, and again, Bradley Dean here claiming perhaps by the CIA, perhaps not, but after the assassination, President Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, LBJ, reversed Kennedy's orders on Vietnam while conveniently appointing former CIA Director Allen Dulles, who was fired by President Kennedy for lying and manipulating when it came to the Bay of Pigs, as the fox in the chicken coop to the Warren Commission's investigations of JFK's assassination. But getting back to the Bay of Pigs and getting back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and that whole timeline, the CIA sent 1,500 Cuban exiles to invade Castro's Cuba. This also called Operation Mongoose. It failed due to poor planning, security, and backing. The planners had imagined the invasion would spark a popular uprising against Castro, which never happened. A promised American airstrike also never occurred. This was the CIA's first public setback, causing, again, President Kennedy to fire CIA Director Allen Dulles. Now, also more on this, we saw with Operation Northwoods, the first breakthrough in declassified documents that described the CIA's proposals to commit false flag acts of terrorism in the United States and blame them on Cuba to justify invading Cuba during the missile crisis. This proposal made its way up to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lyman Lewis Lemitzer. Kennedy said no. Dulles was fired, as mentioned, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lemitzer, was removed as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was not fired. He was reassigned. From 1963 to 1969, he became the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and Europe. And there was also something called Operation Gladio, which was Italian for sword. There's some sketchiness as to whether or not the CIA can be directly implicated, be proven to be implicated in it, but it is basically theorized that they, along with MI6, had a stay-behind operation in several European countries in which they would recruit people to commit acts of terror, to kill hundreds of innocent Europeans is what wound up happening, and attempted to blame the deaths on Baader-Meinhof, Red Brigades, and other left-wing and communist groups, and certainly not defending communism in the least, but this is something that also the CIA was said to be involved in and implicated in. And continuing on here, in 1964, a CIA-backed military coup overthrew the democratically elected government of Goulart, the junta that replaces it. Well, in the next 2 decades, become one of the most bloodthirsty in history, General Castelo Branco